Part 1 will talk about sections and the grade markers or splits found within. Riders must follow their grade splits or markers. Each rider must follow the colour that's appropriate to their grade. Therefore, a C grade rider with a blue nameplate must follow the blue splits or markers, and a rider with a red nameplate would be A grade and therefore follow the red splits or markers. Here's some examples of splits or markers and a rider riding through them. Here, a C grade rider with a blue nameplate correctly rides between the two blue splits. And again, he rides around the correct side of the blue split. Notice the arrow directing him to the right side of the split. The observer marks him clean, meaning no penalties. Here, a B grade rider wearing a yellow plate rides on the correct side of the split, his rider's left. Here, a C grade rider with a blue plate is still correct because he is still riding on the appropriate side of the blue split. Rider penalties. It's a 5-point penalty if the rider rides over or dislodges his grade split or marker. A section is defined by the boundary tapes. A rider must always stay within those boundary tapes. If a rider crosses the boundary tape with either his front or his rear wheel, it results in a maximum penalty of 5 points. A rider can brush up against the boundary tape or even push it slightly sideways, but it must not be crossed. A maximum penalty of 5 points will incur if a rider breaks a boundary tape. A rider must complete the section travelling around all the appropriate markers for his grade, but at no time is he allowed to cross his own wheel tracks. Here we see Bob riding into a section, incurring 5 for his wheels not going both sides of the split, crossing the path that he has already inscribed on the section. This would incur a penalty of 5. An observer will penalise a rider for footing or dabbing. This is when the rider places his foot on the ground. 1 penalty point per footing. A rider can place a foot down while being stationary for just a 1-point penalty. A rider can stationary balance without footing for no penalty. Footing actually occurs when any part of the rider touches the ground, be that his foot, hip, elbow, knee or shoulder, and it's the same penalty, 1 per footing. Here we see Bob incur a penalty of 1 for footing once with his elbow against the tree. And here again we see him incurring 1 for using his hip. Each footing incurs a 1-point penalty, up to a maximum of 3 in each section. That's 1 penalty point per footing. Here we see Bob riding again and incurring 2 points, 1 and 2. This time Bob rides through using 5 or 6 dabs, but only incurs the maximum of 3 penalty points. A rider can stop within a section with no footing or rollback for no penalty points. Stopping with footing incurs 1 penalty point per footing. That's 1 point from Bob, and again with Sam, just 1 penalty point. Here Sam incurs 2-point penalties, 1 for each footing. And Bob gets a definite 2. In this section, Sam scores 3 penalty points for 3 or more dabs within a section. Moving either wheel sideways, as in bouncing or hopping, incurs no penalty points. Here we see Sam successfully negotiate a split by bouncing the front and the back of his motorcycle around. This incurs no penalty points. He has not footed and he has not rolled backwards. That's a 0 or clean. A rider who drags or slides his foot along the ground would be considered to have multiple dabs and therefore incur the maximum footing penalty of 3. If a rider dismounts his machine during a section, this incurs a penalty of 5. This can occur when both feet are behind the rear axle line, or in this instance, where both feet are on one side of the machine. If a rider's handlebars touch the ground, he is deemed to have dismounted or fallen off his machine. He then incurs a penalty of 5. A rider can still be penalised for footing while his feet are on the pegs. In this example, we see Mick physically dragging his bike off the obstacle with his feet. This would incur 2-point penalty, 1 for each foot. If a rider stalls the machine within a section but does not foot, he incurs no penalty points. As we see in this section, Bob stalls his machine but managed to restart without putting his feet down. He incurs no penalty. And again, Bob stalls but manages to roll out without footing. No penalty. Then again, if a rider stalls within a section and has to stop and foot to restart the bike, he gets the maximum penalty of 5 points. A section maximum penalty of 5 points is incurred for intentionally or accidentally allowing the machine to roll backwards. If a rider foots and is stationary, he must have both hands on the handlebars. Non-compliance is a 5-point penalty. There are some specific rules in trials relating to sidecars. Failing to maintain forward motion is a maximum penalty of 5. Unlike a solo trials rider, here we see the sidecar rider and passenger stopping and receiving a maximum of 5 penalty points. For a solo rider, stopping without going backwards would be no penalty. Also, if a sidecar passenger dabs or foots, they will receive the maximum of 5 penalty points. If a sidecar passenger dabs or foots with body parts, it is still the maximum penalty of 5 points. Dabbing with body parts is intentionally supporting the rider, not just glancing an object. Here's a few small examples of a rider completing a section. Bob has just entered the section. See how you score him. Okay, let's see that again. Nothing lost there. Penalty of 1 for footing. Correct sided marker, nothing. But he's ridden over the marker. That's the maximum, 5 points lost. And a second example. Okay, let's now score Bob for this ride. 5 points straight away for riding outside his grade marker. 1 for a dab. That's still a maximum of 5. Okay, and here's a third example of section riding from Bob. How many points are deducted for this ride? Okay, let's score Bob again. Here he starts off correctly. Loses 1 point for footing. Another dab, that brings him up to 2 points. Dabs again, that's 3. But now Bob crosses his line, so incurs the maximum of 5 penalty points for that section.